Welcome to the Extreme Authority Podcast with Aaron Huey and Robert Raymond Riefel.
Robert, as we were preparing for the show, I had a showing of my property here. And I had gone to ChatGPT and I had put in, hey, how many people have actually read or owned one of Victor Hansen's books? You know, Chicken Soup for the Soul sold 500 million copies. In the episode, I talked about Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, and we used to give that to the teenagers here at the treatment facility when we were running it. That one alone was one of his biggest sellers. It's touched so many people that I wanted to know, one, in how many people had read Chicken Soup for the Soul or had owned Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I was assuming we would be talking about 1 in 1,000, 1 in 15,000, something like that. So while it was doing the math, I went out to meet the people who are interested in purchasing this property. And the woman started telling a story of being caught in those floods back in July in Texas. They had to swim out of their attic. It was very traumatizing. They were right across the river from Camp Mystic, which had a tremendous tragedy with girls dying and drowning. She and her children had a truly traumatic experience. So I'm sitting out here in my living room talking to them. And this is coming off after I've mentioned, hey, I got to go. I'm going to go interview Victor Hansen with my business partner. And she says, this is amazing because there in July, I was swimming out of my attic to escape my house and keep my daughters alive. And 3 days later, my best friend sees the amount of trauma and I'm shaking and I'm crying. And she hands me a book that I had seen many years ago but never read. And it was called Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I'm just like, you know how the universe aligns for something. And I came back and here's what ChatGPT came up with the numbers based on the series has sold 500 million plus copies a run across 275 plus titles. With the world at 8.1 to 8.2 billion people in 2025, if each copy were read by exactly one unique person, roughly 1 in 16 people have owned a copy of Chicken Soup for the Soul or one of the titles. But books get passed around, and using a conservative 2 to 3 readers per copy, that's 1 in 8 to 1 in 5 have read one of this man's books.
That's the thing we want everybody to be prepared from. It takes a big person, big mind, big spirit, big connection to do something like that. In this interview, Aaron and I were just blown away. This man is a consummate professional in marketing, in storytelling, in connecting the dots. Your mind's can be blown. Aaron and I think we had hair when we started with him, but he blew the follicles out of our heads. And so that's why we're all now aerodynamic. But in all seriousness, buckle up. This episode, and there's a reason why we're going to have him back. Get ready for this episode with Victor Hansen and watch. Just pick up even one thing. It'll change your life. Well, Mark, I love sharing with people the story of when you had the first impact on me. And this is going to lead to the question I want to ask you right off the bat. December 2002, you're at a program called Wealth and Wisdom. You are the very first speaker up. I'm at the beginning of my journey. I'm now realizing I want to be an author. I want to possibly be a speaker. And I get the privilege of being the speaker liaison. I go up to your hotel room, help guide you through the back of the Vancouver Convention and Exhibition Center. And we ended up having time in the back. And the first thing that struck me about you was your authenticity, your humbleness, your just service of being there. And you allowed me to ask any question I had. And that told me right there I wanted to be that kind of trainer. But then what took me to another level is the moment you stepped off stage, we had to run you to get to a flight because you're a busy man, especially back then. And you, though, took the time as people queued up in line to at least shake hands with every single person, even though we had to get you out of the room because you wanted to thank them for taking their time to be there. And even today, that set my whole journey of how for the last 23 years now since that meeting, I've wanted to be on stage, off stage, that authenticity. And so my first question for you is this. When you first tasted success, say with the Chicken Soup for the Soul book, how did you stay the author of your life story instead of letting fame write it for you?
What a great question. I hope I did it. Once in a while I drank my own bathwater and I got too full of myself, but I am honored to hear that at least that day I was humble. And humble doesn't mean lowly like a word, it means teachable. And because we're talking about expert and authority, the middle of the word authority is AUTHOR, author, which means you and every one of us is the author of his or her own experience, because I've taught my whole life because I learned it from a lot of people, but you're basically the author of your own reality. And now my wife, who's deep into quantum physics, we know that you're not a three-dimensional human being, you're a multi-dimensional human being. And if you go into the fourth dimension, your soul controls your mind, which controls your body, which controls your results. So the higher and deeper you go, the wiser you get, the more informed you are. And the more you'll take the path where you'll pray yourself up, if prayer or meditation is your modus operandi of ascending in consciousness, ascending in awareness, which in lay language is called cosmic consciousness, and in Christian model it's Christ consciousness. Whatever, if you're a Buddhist, a Buddha consciousness, right? If you ascend in consciousness and awareness, you see from a different perspective. You can see the gestalt, the whole system all at once, and hopefully I'm able to do that and see different perspectives. And every one of my teachers has been great. My co-authors, like Jack, once in a while I come in on these positions and Jack would say, he's third in his class at Harvard and very astute and wise in his own little way, and said, would you mind if I gave you a different perspective on that? So the deal is each of us needs a different perspective, and because now I'm a publisher and we're doing all kinds of books, and the guy that, like you, heard me in the prehistoric days while dinosaurs ruled the earth, this guy is a superstar chiropractor, did this book called Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, God's book of wisdom, and he published it, and it's now in like 103 countries, and he comes to me and says, I just want to give it to you and thank you for getting me into book business. I said, my gosh, if you can be on 4 continents with that, just think what I can do with you, because I did this little book called Chicken Soup for the Soul Bible, and we sold like 70,000 of these a week at Walmart. We just killed it because it's got a purple cover. It doesn't scare you. It doesn't threaten you. And it's got little stories that get you into big stories. And, we're doing a whole new thing now with the Bible. And I did that because Jack and I champion different books, so I can claim that I champion that 100% because I've been going to 2 churches a Sunday for my whole life. Plus, I lived in India for a long time and saw the 500-year-old man when I was in Madras. Yeah, I know my way around India and in a lot of places. And I've been to Asia 80 times, as you know. So I've got a lot of breadth and depth, and you see different things. And one more line, and then I'll get out of it. But Mark Twain, who's one of my favorite authors, and Mark Twain says, everyone's got to travel because it gets rid of narrow-mindedness, bigotry, and limited thinking. And I thought, what a great deal. If you're well-traveled, you do that. And he obviously went around the world a couple times. Last time he had to, just to pay all of his debts, because he bought the first printing press and it didn't work.
Oh, Mark, now that you're a massive publisher, and we need to get into that because there's people reference you as an authority in the publishing world for very good reason. But I want to go back to what we see on the internet when we do research about you is you facing 144 rejections before your breakthrough point. What I want to understand about authority and Mark Victor Hansen is, at what point through the rejection process did you stop accepting their authority over what you had created, and you and your partner were able to go, no, we know? Like, what was that point? Was there a moment, was there awakening where you just said, these guys can all suck it, we understand what we have? Or was it different?
First of all, the joke, then I'm going to be serious, but the joke is they didn't like Jack, but that's not true. Jack's totally likable, lovable, affectionate, and hugs every woman in the audience. I don't think much about men for him, but he's an all-time great hugger. And we taught hugging in our first Chicken Soup for the Soul book. So the answer is remember, I've been selling since I was 9 years old. God bless my parents. They taught phenomenal work ethic. But my daddy was a little Danish baker who wanted me to take over the bakery. And when I worked on that, it was not my right livelihood, right? What we wrote in this book, Crystal and I wrote this book, which is about to become a movie. It looks like Ask, The Bridge for Your Dreams, Your Destiny. And we say, you ask God and everyone needs to do this. God, what is my right livelihood? And that's whether you're 6 or 60, you got to know what your right livelihood is. What is the destination or destinations, plural, that you need to achieve? And I said to my dad, who I totally loved and respected and admired, I said, look, Pa, I'm a white glove guy. I'm not exactly sure what one is, but I'm sure I'm one of those guys. And he said, well, okay. And he never heard me talk until he was like 70 years old. And he came and I had like 4,000 people, and it was in Huntington Beach. And he kept hitting my mother just passed away, and he kept touching these beautiful young women that were sitting in front, saying, that's my boy. He's really good, don't you think? It really touched my heart that he got off on how much fun it was, because he'd never heard me talk. And Robert and I, we've all been together, but I think being fun, God only gave us a volitional ability of laughter, and we got to have the self-proclaimed, self-deprecating laughter where you laugh at your own inaneness like I have today. But back to selling, at 9 years old, I had to sell my way forward so I could buy a bicycle and all that. And I sold more greeting cards than I went live. At that time, 367 bucks, became number one greeting card salesman. 40 years later, I become the number one writer for greeting cards of American Greeting Cards, same company I worked for as a little kid. And I ultimately bought the bike come spring. But what I learned from my mother was a 4-letter clean word, N-E-X-T. When somebody rejects you, just say next. They just are having a bad day. It's easier to say no than to say yes. They don't quite understand the offer, or I haven't made the offer right. So I took responsibility. Now, when we had all those in the publishing business, we got pink slips, and Jack and I would never tell our respective wives at that time. We had this pile of rejection slips. You don't go to your wife and say, hey, honey, we just got rejected for the 50th time. They go, hey, are you guys a knucklehead? Are you a loser? What's with you guys? Don't you get it? They don't. Because, and God bless, I ended up getting, I wrote this book, 1 Minute Millionaire, with Random House, and they gave us $1 million 3 times for that book and Cash and Flash. And they're a great house. They do $25 million a year, but they don't take any risk. They are risk adverse. And they turned us down, and then they said, I guess we made a mistake. And they said, but I didn't turn you down. It was those other people in the room that didn't like you guys for whatever reason. We always brushed our teeth and smelled good. What?
You didn't turn me down. You turned Jack down. I'm good.
That's right. Well, and since you just talked about the book Ask, because you've written that book about asking as a bridge to destiny, what are the questions that you ask yourself daily now to stay aligned with your purpose, like right now? What kind of questions do you ask yourself?
At the highest level, I say, because my teacher when I was in graduate school was Bucky Fuller, one of the 4 smartest guys alive, according to Time magazine, in the last century. Bucky did all these inventions like geodesic domes, dimaxing cars, all kinds of cool stuff, and synergetic energetics, world game, and all that stuff I was working on with him for 7 years. But Bucky always says start with the universe. And so the question you ask spiritually is, am I in alignment with God? Am I in line with the highest and greatest amount of good that I can do? And then the second question, which I really love, is what did I do today to make God smile? Right? If you're made in the image and likeness of the Creator, and you're creator stuff, and you're eternal, you better be doing something important here. And as a publisher now, we're doing 2 books you need to know. One is on Death Doula, which is somebody who holds your hand when you're exiting, sort of like hospice. And then the other one is, if you've done any of the views of near-death experiences, and there's 20,000 of them plus now on Netflix. But we had this guy call me the other day. He said, I'm really rich. I know who you are, and I can't get published in New York, which is true. Most people go to New York and they go, get out of here. You're nobody from nowhere, and you're not doing anything and nothing we're interested in, or we would know about you, right? The guy said, I was dead for 24 minutes, and then I was in the hospital for 28 days, and my brain had flatlined. Now, when I was flatlined, remember I said the spiritual runs the mental. He was up on the ceiling floating, right? Some of you know that story. Some of the people watching are going, is Mark making this up? No, you go watch these people. You'll be a true believer, I promise you, because you and I came into life with an assignment. We came into life, as far as Crystal and I are concerned, with a destiny. Your job is to find it, because you have amnesia when you're born. I didn't create that. That's just the way it is, right? And you got to scrape off all the amnesia and say, what is my personal destiny? Because if you go to the other side, Big G tells you, oh, man, Aaron, you got a name of a brother or somebody famous in the Bible, but guess what? You didn't do what you're supposed to do. And you're saying, wait a second, it smells better, looks better, it's more beautiful than ever. And all of a sudden you go back crushing through your crown chakra and wake up, and you're going to hear that in this story now. So this guy says, I'm on a gurney right here in Scottsdale at Mayo Hospital, which is an $18 billion institution. Big, big, big. We're bigger here than they are up in Minnesota. And this guy's technically dead, right? He's flatlined. His wife's talking to the doctor, fall in love with this doctor, and said, look, I got to keep him alive 29 days. Electronically, he's plugged in. And the reason is that we get insurance. He bought $10 million of insurance 2 years ago, and I can't have it unless. So they're falling in love, and she says, you get $5 million and I get $5 million, and all things will be happy, and there'll be rainbows and flowers, and you quit working as a medical doctor, and we go make love every day, and it'll be just perfect. This guy's hearing all that, but he's hearing it in an astrally projected body. He's out of his crown chakra. The Bible calls it the silver cord. That's why Jews wear yarmulkes. Very interesting. So the 29th day comes, and they pull the plug, and the guy bounces out of bed like this, pulls out all the IVs. And I heard everything you said. When you're on the other side, you got 100% retention. You get into being omniscient and omnipresent and omni everything, right? All everything. So he says, not only are you not going to get any money, because old wife of mine, I see that you married me for my wallet. You ain't getting it. I'm going to divorce you. I'm changing the will. I'm changing the insurance. You and the doctor can go get married, do anything you want. I'll never want to see you again, but you're getting zero. Isn't that a cool story?
Wow.
And by the way, you guys can deny anything you want, but the story is just so cool that I've told it to the people. We're going to make a movie. The first story in Ask, of course, is The Fable of Michaela, which my wife's now written into 3 screenplays, and we're meeting with all the names I could name, and I'm not allowed to name, that we're meeting with in Hollywood in scant days, all want it. And then they said, well, look, you got more content. And the first guy offered us $4 million, which is another thing I'll say. We turned him down. Can you imagine me, Robert, turning down $4 million for a movie? I said, look, you're giving us a horror director and producer, and I don't do horror. I do heart-touching, soul-penetrating love stuff. I'm sorry, but I can't believe that I'm saying no to $4 million, but we did. And we're going to get the right person now that makes the most wonderful stories. Next time you interview me, we'll probably have it signed, sealed, and delivered. And we're going to do a lot of great stories like the one I just told you, because we are inundated with superior stories.
Yeah, and, Aaron, what's the name of the gentleman that we've got coming up for this season as well from 127 Hours?
Oh, Aaron Ralston.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So,
yeah. Well, you know what? This kind of, I'm getting a little bit of a left turn here. And I want to ask you about it, because you talked about, even as a kid, you're selling greeting cards and then you're writing greeting cards, on and on. Mark, has there ever been a time in your life where you questioned this authority that you seem to carry? Now you're working with Hollywood, and you can go up against the New York Times, and people come to you when they won't, and your book outsold, and like you're just so it seems that this concept of authority, leadership, influence, mentorship is something that you have dialed. I guess the 2-part question is, why has authority been easy for you, if it has? And number 2, when have you questioned your own? When have you just went like, who am I fooling?
The answer is yeah. I was with Dr. Fuller for so long, and Kent State happened. It blew up its university. It blew up ours. I go into Bucky's office one day. I'm the last one. There's 7 guys, young guys that are purportedly smart, traveling with them, and they were. If I had to pick who had higher IQs, I would be the lowest in that little group, because they're amazing. Bucky comes in the office and says, I got to read you one of his 40 books. It was called No More Secondhand God. And the first line is, you cannot charge the work of universe on the university. Mentally, I'm sitting there going, all those guys came out of here flipped out, and he told them not to tell me, because I had the softest heart, that not to tell me what's going on. He said, I'm sorry, Mark, I got to fire you. I said, I'm getting fired. What did I do? He said, you didn't do anything. The university got blown up. The president got fired, and the president had to fire all of us, because we had a university that everybody at 65, where they got fired at Harvard, Wharton, Yale, Stanford, Cambridge, Oxford, Bovans College in India, where I went and studied for a while. All of all those guys got fired all at once just because of a political regime change, which is kind of crap going on right now. You know, you lose some good stuff and when there's a conflict and people don't like people, which is really absurd. Anyhow, I went to New York. I was building geodesic domes because I knew how to do it. I'd learned that, as a comprehensive anticipatory design scientist, which is a title I never talk about because it's so pompous, but it was Bucky's title for all of us. Anyhow, so I just said I'm a designer, right? Back in the prehistoric days. But I was building $2 million a year with the domes. I built the Wall Street Racquet Club, botanical gardens, aviaries, houses. I'm having a time of my life. I'm a big shot in New York, which is, the world's capital of business and stuff, and eating at top of the sixes, just in World Trade Center because it was still there, and all kinds of way cool stuff. And all of a sudden, we have this oil embargo in 1973, 4-ish. And I went bankrupt like that in one day because I was building the buildings out of PVC, polyvinyl chloride, petrochemicals. And I went bankrupt so fast because I wasn't, I was building, investing, and I didn't save 10% like I teach. Save 10% from $1, right? So if you earn $1, you save 10 cents. If you earn a million, you save 100,000. Anyhow, I didn't do that, and I had to go to the world's biggest library at that time's New York Public Library, and I check out a book, How to Go Bankrupt by Yourself. I'm on the Eastern Long Island court system, and they took everything from you in the old days. It was really tragic for me. I'm feeling trash, and a lawyer comes up and said, for $300, I'll take you bankrupt. I said, buddy, if I had $300, I wouldn't be going bankrupt. Anyhow, so that was my best, worst experience. Long story short, I'm sleeping in a sleeping bag in front of another guy's room in Hicksville, Long Island, New York. So you see, I was not styling and profiling. And I asked God, what do you want me to do? Because I was ready to slash my wrist because things were so bad. I thought they weren't bad at all, but relatively speaking, I didn't feel good about myself. And I was not creating a new income or a new life. And God said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to speak to people that care about things that matter, that make a life transformative difference to them. The next morning, I'm down at breakfast. I tell my roommates, hey, I want to be a speaker. Do you know anyone young, not with a cotton top white hair like me, not a Broadway star, not a celebrity, not a lawyer, doctor? I said, yeah, this kid's 10 or 12 years older than you. He's on Hop Hog talking to all the realtors. Here's my ticket. You go out there. I think you're going to like it. He walked into an audience that was dead. Interest rate was 18%. So nothing was happening. Chip Collins, who became my best friend and my mentor at that time, wowed this audience. He had them laughing, joking, cavorting, hitting each other, teasing. And over 3 hours, he wound them up. And back then, I know it's hard for you guys to believe because you've grown up with lavalier mics, but there weren't a thing called lavalier mics. They only had hand mics. And it was a crummy hotel, and they didn't have one for him. So his voice was like this at the end of his talk. So I walk up to him, shake his hand, and say, Chip, Mark Victor Hansen, I want to buy your lunch. He said, what do you want, kid? I said, I want to do what you do. He said, you don't want to do this. Go get a real job. I said, no. Anyhow, long story short, he told me, do a life insurance business. It's a bottomless pit for motivation. I didn't own any. I didn't know what a premium was. I didn't know what a CLU was. I knew zero. But he said, knock on 10 doors. I'll tell you the words to say. These magic words will get it. I go to 10 people the next day, and I've got a pitted window, permanently air conditioned, freezing my ass off Volkswagen at that moment. And I knock on the last door, and a car's parked 2 blocks away because there's a Cadillac out in front at 6:30 at night. And the guy's name is Tony, and we just hit it off. We had a Vulcan mind meld. It was so beautiful. At the end of the meeting, I said, do you want to cut the check or have your secretary cut? I know there's no secretary. I walked in there, and there's nobody here except him and moi. And yeah, I'm a big boy. I can cut the check. I'm ready to walk out. And he says, hold on a second, kid. I said, what is it? He says, I'm Big Tony. Now, this boy weighed 450 pounds, naked with his ink pen half empty. I mean, this was a substantial human being who I love to this day, if he's alive. I don't know if he is. Anyhow, he said, look, kid, here's the directory to everybody at Metropolitan. We're the number one insurance company, and I'm the number one guy in that company. Here's everybody that is a general agent or manager. You call every one of them. You tell them they got to hire you or they got to meet with Big Tony. You got it? I go, holy cow, man. I got a treasure. Now, remember, for 6 months, I'm ready to slash my wrist. Now, in one day, I got a gold thing. The next day, I start doing 4 talks a day. I sold prospecting, presenting, closing, good work habits. And I do a talk. you guys may not remember, but in the old days before cell phones, we had dimes in our pocket. I always had $2 worth of dimes every day. I'd be dialing for dollars, calling people, setting up the next point while I was doing the last. And the beautiful thing that Chip taught me is he said, here's what you're going to love. It's just like McDonald's has Taco Bell next to it, next to Burger King, next to, whatever. And in the insurance industry, everybody's in the same building, right? So one day, I'm going a little far, but I'm now months into it, and I bought a new Chrysler Cordova car. But this is so cool. Every night I'm praying, just like I taught you guys. I'm saying, okay, God, at the time I needed $400 a day times 250 work days. That's $100,000. Later on, the world's top insurance salesman said, just change it by 10. If your kid needed $4,000 operation, would you be able to make it in a day? Ben Feldman, the world's greatest salesman on cover of Time and Fortune and Forbes and everything, said 10, Mark, 10. It's 4,000 times 250 is $1 million. That's all you got to do. And I start making $1 million. But this day I'm saying I need 400. I wake up at 2:52 in the morning. It was so clear. I teach you always have to have a pen and pad next to bed and tell whoever you're sleeping with, male or female, your spouse or spouse equivalent, I wrote down exactly this guy's name and State Mutual. The next day I'm in a building that's owned by Metropolitan, but it says State Mutual, Bill Weiner, and I go, holy cow, that's it. And it was him. I go into the office he said within 4 minutes, he gave me a check for $400. And he said, I was so happy just because you felt good. I didn't even care if you didn't come back. Because your mind, spirit, consciousness, subconscious is a broadcasting and receiving station. And you're always sending out something. I was sending out, I need $400 and I need it tomorrow. And it comes back, right? That the name, I didn't know this guy. I never heard of that insurance company. By the way, there's 1,800 insurance companies, and everybody that tells me, well, I work for every one of them, nobody has worked for every one of them. Nobody. Ain't no way.
And going from these extremes, the ups and downs with your authority, and it's obvious it's been there for you. So here's a question, because you've now influenced well over 500 million people around the world, just through the books alone. We know that's what you've influenced, to try to calculate the numbers. So the question is this: what does enough mean to you now with where you're at?
At the level of humanness, greed means you're still in need and are shallow and in scarcity consciousness. So I got out of that back at 31. I was a multimillionaire, so I have never gone down from that. So that I don't have that level of need. But from God's point of view, God says, is there anything too big for God? And then if you go to the Christian model, which the kingdom of heaven is within, so it's God within, have you done enough to serve and source all the people that you can serve and source? And the answer is absolutely not. I mean, yes, I'm on the board of Child Help. Yes, we've helped 14 million kids get out of abuse, neglect, and trafficking, which I know I shouldn't do this, but you said go deep. The people that are trafficking that we catch, I think we ought to do some body mutilation on them so they can't do that ever again and don't even think about it because they have some body parts missing. It is so true. And we just met with a guy who did Sound of Freedom. Crystal and I spent a day and we did media with him and everything. And he was funded, again, by John Paul DeJoria originally. So we're going in the right direction because, look, I grew up in a family that loved each other and all my brothers and sibs. And I thought, wow, why would somebody do this atrocity to another human being that is unforgivable? And Robert, you were in some of my seminars. Women would always come up to me and say, I got abused. And I thought, because I didn't know about such things, right? And now I do, and I don't like knowing about it. And I don't like that parents write, you're worthless, or with their cigarette butts burning it into a kid's back. And I'm a Horatio Alger Award winner where we take all the at-risk kids and give them a scholarship if they're deserving and meritorious. And we do 35,000 scholarships for academics originally, but now we're doing trades, which is really important because our trades are empty, that we don't have enough plumbers, enough welders. We can go on and on, all the trades. I've just written that in my new book, America's Golden Age, which will be out in January. And then the third thing is tech. We need people in all those fields. So there's no lack of jobs. AI won't take your job. AI employing person will take your job. If I said that right, the person that uses AI will take your job, but not AI itself.
One of the things that has come up as you're talking about, spirit, the inner, the outer, above, below, within, without, I'm curious, in your view, what's the spiritual side of business that most entrepreneurs overlook, and how has that view shaped your current ventures?
I love you guys' questions. So my wife and I pray and meditate together every day, and we also pray before we go to sleep together and hold hands and all that good stuff every day. So, and I've only been away from her in our whole long marriage a few days, and they're like, when we're delivering a grandbaby, she's always at that. And some reason they don't invite me. I don't get it, but I don't get invited.
They don't want the baby to have the same haircut as you, I think is what it is.
No, they all come out with the same haircut I got and you got. By the way, I believe an entrepreneur finds a problem, solves a problem, scales a problem, and makes a vast fortune. And then is exceedingly charitable with it, okay? Because that's the law. That's the rule. You learn, earn, and then return. I didn't set the law, but that's the law. You know, you're here to create, you're here to contribute, and then you're here to be charitable. The point is that when you are starting to do that, you become a no-limit, fully functioning person, and you start to pull off stuff that you didn't know that you could pull off and have influence, which is the first question you asked 40 questions ago, or however many. And Solomon said, Psalm 72, your job is to be an influencer of influencers. Once you have influence, then you got to influence the influencers, which is what we're doing on the show. And so when I go into prayer, it is a felt thing, right? Jesus said, pray the thing for which you're praying has been received, and you shall have it. You got to have it before you get it. Now, what does that mean? Neville said that means you got to live in the assumption of the wish fulfilled. That means you got to be there before you get there. Michael Jordan saw himself as a GOAT, the greatest of all time, before my little grandson is going to be a Michael Jordan type, and I'll tell you that story in a second, but he can take the basketball and slam dunk it. He has to do 100 3-pointers every day at 12 years old. It blows my mind. And I said to Everett, okay, Evie, what's going to happen? He said, well, at 18, I'll make 30 million a year as a Phoenix Sun. I said, whoa. I said, then what? He said, I get goosebumps telling this story. I love it. And I said, then what? He said, well, we taught him goal setting, because every kid should know goal setting by the time they're little. And because you set a goal, you get a goal. If you don't set a goal, you can't get it. Anyhow, he said, 30, I'll be a manager. And I said, then what? At 45, he said, I'm going to buy it. I said, son, that's $4.8 billion, and Grampy is not helping. He said, I'll have the money, Gramps. But we've got the worst kids ever and the best kids coming out. And the worst kids aren't bad. They just aren't taught well. They're not edified. They're not enlightened. They're not educated. They don't have parents and and one of the books we're doing is high-performing grandparents, because we think the grandparents have to take the role now that both husband and wife generally not making enough money, not learning to be entrepreneurs, think they're trained by an industrial educational society that said, grow up and go get a job. A job means you're just over broke. Nope, I don't want anyone to go get a job. I want everyone to be an entrepreneur and then work with entrepreneurs. And if you can't create an entrepreneurial thing that makes a lot of money, work with somebody who can and take some percentage of the deal. In answer to your question, I'm answering too big, probably even too wide, but you said go deep. I'm in a lot of deals now that likes of which, you'd say, why would you get in that? But I'm really good at AI. I study it at least an hour a day. You've been in my seminars. When Bob Proctor and I created MSIs, we said multiple sources of income. And then when I wrote the book 1 Minute Millionaire with Bob Allen, he changed it to multiple sources of income. But if you only have one source of income, you're going to have a problem sooner or later. Like right now, as we do this, America is still shut down. Now, some of you are going to look back and go, well, Mark didn't know what happened. No, I know what happened. We've been 32 days as we're making this shut down. That means people aren't getting paid. That means our airports aren't working. That means there's flights delayed and canceled. That means a lot of people aren't getting food stamps and not eating. I got to go sidebar on that. Can I go sidebar one more time, Aaron? So our grandkids sleep over at this big house. We got a beautiful house. We got the best view of downtown Phoenix and PV and everything. We're on top of McDowell Mountain, which doesn't mean anything to you guys, but that's high. Okay, not the highest, but one of. Anyhow, our daughter comes over, and we got 5 kids, as you guys know, and one of them is a school teacher, and she does so well. She drives a Tesla as a school teacher, not because she makes any money, because she only makes $30,000 a year as a school teacher, but she sells real estate on the side and does pretty well at it. But she's over and says, hey, Dad, I got a problem. These kids are not eating. And I would like you to go to Costco, which you're so keen on. We're doing a big deal with Costco now, but and do these food beef sticks because the kids their stomachs are gnawing at them. And I said, well, tell me how many you want. I said, tell me how many kids you got at school. I'll buy them for everybody. And what else do you want? You need this. I need this. And she gives me this laundry list. It's not okay. You know, when you're saying, well, who should you be charitable to? I can't feed every kid in Arizona. I'm not that rich, but I'm rich enough there's no kid in one of my kids' schools that ain't going to eat. It just isn't acceptable to me. It's like when my little kids were little, and one of my daughter's birthday today as we're doing this, when she was little, the principal comes up to me and said, hey, look, we need new lockers. And I bought $35,000 of lockers. And then she said, hey, we're having a problem getting these because a lot of foreign kids at Kaiser Elementary at that time said, we can't get the kids to read. I said, well, let's do it backwards. Let's get them to write first, and then we'll get them to read. Now, here's what amazing happened, because I did all the research and supplied all the books and products, of course, free, and my books, of course, and they all fell in love with them because the little short stories, 3 pages each, doesn't scare a non-reader into reading. And the little kids that were speaking Vietnamese or Chinese or Spanish took the books home and read it out loud to their parents, and the parents started coming to the school and learn. So we got 2 educated for the price of 1. When I was in graduate school with Bucky, I wrote down my 10 big-ass, hairy, audacious goals, and one of them was educate uneducated humanity expeditiously and omniconsiderately, meaning let's try to get everybody in. I love what Salim Khan's doing, and I like what we're doing at Horatio Algier Awards, which people should go look at the videos of mine, everybody else there, and mine online at YouTube. But
wow. You know, my mind is getting blown just listening and having this conversation. And it goes back to what I said in 2002 when I first met you. This is, to me, you are like just real. This is you. This is not you being someone else. Who you are here is who you are on stage. Who you are on stage is who you are when you're at a car dealership. Much appreciate that for you. I think with our time that we have right now, because I know you're going to that charity ball, is final question I'm going to have for you is this. When you coach leaders now, because that's what you're doing. Everybody you're impacting is a leader. What pattern do you spot instantly in a person that reveals whether someone has true authority or versus just having confidence?
It is an extraordinary question, but you can see the life force energy in somebody as young as a little kid. Now, Crystal comes on to 9. She's one of 9 sibs, right? She was born in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And we're up there, and this little kid is taking over all the kids, just a real natural-born leader. And yes, leadership can be trained, and yes, I'm close friends with Dr. John Maxwell and a lot of the people that train this stuff. So, you know, and I've written endorsements for him and helped him get in Horatio, and we're close friends. But and Adley Kinsman, I name the women as much as the men. The point is, this kid had the juice. And on the way out, we're ready to leave the house and been to the party. I've been watching this kid do every game, everything, and being exquisitely excited, but the leader of leaders, and the swimming pool, the leader of leaders, and the slide, the leader of leaders, and playing with the football or Frisbee. I've watched this kid for hours now. And he comes up to me at the end and says, boy, I've really liked meeting you and talking to you. I said, listen, when you get older, I want to be your mentor. And I promise you, I'll hire you into one of my companies like that. You can see it. You can feel it. And it goes way beyond. It means that they've been working on themselves at a profound, deep inner level, because the inner controls all the outer, which is what most people don't get. That's why the kingdom of heaven is within. It's not without. If somebody's got it outside, it means they're doing the deep work inside. Like we're dealing with a guy here, Conley Wolfswinkel, writing his book. He's doing $200 billion Taiwanese semiconductor right here in Arizona, because we didn't have earthquakes. We got water for the next 1,000 years in the desert, and it's really way cool. And now NVIDIA's coming here to have their chips made, and their chips are 1/80th the thickness of a human hair. We're in the coolest time ever. But one guy's doing all that, and this guy thinks multidimensionally, just like Elon Musk. He doesn't think in a sidereal, linear way. He concepts stuff and puts together the puzzle pieces. Same thing I do in the book business. Same thing, reason people put me in their companies, these giant companies that we're now working with and changing the world with, is because they go, nobody thinks like you, and nobody thinks like either of you. But the point is, how profound can you make your thinking so you're passionately on purpose about stuff that's going to make a quantum difference for everyone in an exponential way. I think I probably too many words in one run-on sentence.
Hey, and I actually understood most of them. Aaron, he was probably lost on a few of them, but no, it's probably the reverse. And actually, as you were sharing that, Mark, in all seriousness, it made me think of a young gentleman that Aaron and I now are mentoring, 18 years old, out of Romania. I was doing an event in Romania earlier this year, and he was 17, hadn't quite turned. And just his energy, his presence, everything that you were just describing. And he came up to me at the end and he said, I have a question, because he was actually there being of service as one of our crew. And he said, would you mentor me? And I looked at him. I said, if you're at any event I'm at, I'm absolutely going to mentor you. Take extra time. And I was headed to Ireland 2 days later. He instantly booked a flight to be in Ireland, to be at that event, to be of service again. And it was just like, dang. And then Aaron and I just taught him in Malaysia. We had him, and he wants us to mentor him more. And it's like, how can you say no to someone who's got that energy and has that presence? And older people don't know how to take him, because he's just authentically brilliant being himself. So I love that answer. As we wrap up on this time, and Aaron, I'm going to make a suggestion. I think we're going to have Mark back, right? What do you think?
Probably.
Probably.
Probably. If he'll have us.
Yeah. Yeah. Final thoughts or words that you have of how people can connect with you, what you're doing now. Take this time to just tell people how to, connect with where you're at now. Because you've been doing this for a long, long time, and you obviously aren't slowing down.
No. I'm 77 going to 127, so I got 50-year runway in front of me, and I've got written out exactly what we want to do, because you're not supposed to die young. Genesis 6:3 says you're supposed, minimum, Moses said 120. Minimum. That wasn't maximum. I'm a maximalist. He was a minimalist. But anyhow, we have started a publishing company because the publishing industry got decimated during COVID. You only got one place to sell stuff, and then they shut down all the bookstores because they're non-essential. Whorehouses are essential. Liquor stores are essential. Bookstores are not essential. So a lot of publishers went out of business. So Crystal and I started MarkVictorHansenLibrary.com. It's real easy. My name with library.com. I'm Library 3.0, but we will do ghost write for you, fiction and nonfiction, for like $29,900. But what we really love doing is biographies, because everybody over 40 that's made some money and can easily afford it. We're not trying to bankrupt anyone. People come up and say, I'll refinance my RV. I said, not for me, you won't. I don't need it. But we want to help people get their biographies. And we've got the best writers in the world, because they got fired in Hollywood. They got fired in New York. And we took the best of the best. And we want to help everyone get their masterpiece out, because the reason you got to have a biography, my cliche that I've written is, a biography is the only lasting gift of love that you give your family, friends, the future, and the world that's permanent. Now, somebody that's worth 100 million or billion says, no, my money's permanent. No, it isn't, man. You're forgotten in 2 generations. If you're damn lucky, they won't squander the money. The Bishop estate, all the money got stolen because you can't control your money from the grave. I don't think it's doable. I think you'll be on the other side looking down going, whoa, what are they doing with the bread I created? Whereas if you got a book, you list your values, your virtues, your qualities, what your expectations are, what your hopes and dreams are. That's why Andrew Carnegie is one of my heroes. He was the original Elon Musk, pulled off all the stuff. Why is Elon Musk able to do it? Because he has 5-year written goals, right? And every one of us has to have those, and you got to codify them in a book. You say, well, I got a video. Videos disappear. The Sound of Music, most people have never seen it. You and I have, because we're a little bit more senior. Maybe you guys haven't. Maybe I'm too senior for you. But unless you show it to your grandkids, it ain't going to keep showing up.
No, Mark, this has been incredible. We absolutely will be back in touch with you. I have my notes, not just, I have all my questions up here on the screen, but listening to you talk, as always, gives me another page of, I need to think of that. I need to look at this. I need to write this down. Mark, you've been on the stage with the greats. You've taught with the greats. You've taught the greats, and you've been mentored by, Bucky Fuller. Is there anyone greater? Nikolai Tesla? Okay, maybe, but you had Bucky. Listening to you, watching you, experiencing your work firsthand, being able to pass your work on, it's phenomenal. And I just thank you for this opportunity. That's what it's like sitting in a room with Mark Victor Hansen. You're going to learn from stories. Folks, you kind of don't know what to think afterwards. And so I'm going to say I'm just walking away feeling things about some of the stuff he said. So I'm just going to leave it there. I don't want to try to focus the show for you. Here's what Robert and I would like you to do next is go to AHR3. That stands for Aaron Huey, Robert Raymond Riopel, AHR3.com, and see if what we're doing interests you there. We'd love to continue to get to know you and work with you. And most importantly, thank you for listening to the Extreme Authority Podcast.